So now we'll talk about trials. So trial is, if you're in a situation you think is bad, and it's a trial, and it's to build you up. So we talked about last week that God no longer acts out of judgment or anger. So it's not punishment, because Jesus' blood was sufficient for that, but it's for our benefit. And so we'll go to unlikely passage to look at that. You have Genesis.
I do.
1 and 2.
1 and 2. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters.
Okay. So when God started creation, did he start it by creating something beautiful and spectacular?
Not so much.
No, he created something that was without form, it was void, and it was dark. And so, and some say it was chaotic.
Mm-hmm.
So God created chaos first. So in the same way, sometimes God can develop good things out of chaos. And so God produced life out of this chaos. So God deliberately created the chaos and the darkness as the womb from which the earth was birthed. So the earth was birthed out of chaos. And then, later in the verse we see that and the Spirit of God was hovering over the water. So the Spirit of God hovered over the water, and we know from John 1, that all things were made by him, Jesus. So, he said that it was Jesus' Spirit that was hovering over the water. And so hovering over the water, he transformed the darkness into life. So he started with darkness, but out of that, he spoke to it to create light. He spoke to create the animals in the sea. The earth came out of the waters. Life came out of the waters. And so everything that exists here came out of that chaos. And so if we look at God's method of how he does things, sometimes there can be chaos that's formed, and the purpose is for somebody to rise up, or for you to rise up specifically, or maybe a broader chaos for his people to rise up, it's to develop you, to strengthen you in some area. And so and that may be the only method you're going to develop that strength. And so if we're in the chaos, we look at what did God do? He spoke to create light. So we want to speak light into the situation. So if we're in a chaotic situation, we don't want to talk negatively and complain about it. We want to speak life into it. Speak life into the spirit world to cause it good. I know God is using this for good. I know that, that plans. Speak life into it. And when the Spirit was hovering over the water, when you hover over the water, you see your own reflection. And he saw that it was good. And so that's what came out of it. So we need to look for the good in those situations. So we can look at chaos as a principle of productivity, not a principle for destruction. So an example of that is a caterpillar. So caterpillars, eventually they build cocoons and they wrap themselves in it and they become butterflies. And so there was someone who saw a bunch of cocoons, and they decided, hey, I need to help. And they were starting to try to break out. And so he said, let me help him. And so he took a knife and he cut the butterflies out. So the butterflies came out. But then he realized that, hey, now none of these butterflies were flying.
Mm.
And so he said, oh, I guess the butterflies in this region were defective or something. They can't fly. But what actually happens is that the cocoon, when the caterpillar is wrapped in the cocoon, it's the pushing and breaking out that strengthens their wings, that allows them to fly. So it's like them breaking out, them struggling and pushing and struggling to free themselves, to get out of that situation, is what turns them into what they need to be. You know, if they don't go through that, then they won't be able to fly. They won't reach their full potential. So it's the breaking out, it's the overcoming that circumstance that creates us sometimes. And so it's our faith is built. You know, if everything in your life goes good, you say, "Oh, I believe in God," but then when something happens, all of a sudden, all your faith is gone. But it's like if we've been through something and God brought us through, and we went through something bigger and God brought us through. Every time we go through something, you know, we get our faith, you know, but then maybe months or years later, you know, you lose your job. You say, "Oh, God's going to get me through." God gets you through. And you're like, okay, now. So now you have a little more faith. So you go through these situations and your faith rises every time you get out of a struggle. You know, over time it's going to go back down, but it's never going to go back down to where it was before you got into that struggle. So the next time you lose your job, you're not as concerned if you're in the same situation. And so it's the circumstances, it's the trials that build us up sometimes. And so the only reason that God comes in to get us out of those chaos sometimes is if we're not doing our job, if we're not doing what we're supposed to do to get out. So if you realize that every time there's chaos, that there's something valuable hidden in it, then even if it was something that wasn't caused by God, there's still something valuable hidden, can be something valuable hidden in it. So if every time you're in a bad situation, you turn it for good, or God turns it for good, or you have faith to turn it to good, then Satan will start to realize, okay, well, this is just helping this person, and they'll start to leave you alone. Because then you've taken away one of his weapons.